December 23rd, 2019. A sprawling Connecticut mansion sits silent under freshly fallen snow. Inside, 73-year-old tech billionaire Harrison Caldwell lies motionless in his private study. The door is locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. No suicide note. But on his desk, investigators find something that makes no sense. A single envelope addressed to someone who doesn't exist. A name that was legally erased from all records 26 years ago. The name reads Michael Brennan. And when they open that envelope, 3 detectives would request transfers. 1 would resign, and a family's carefully constructed legacy would shatter in ways no one could have imagined. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. Harrison Caldwell built an empire from nothing, transforming himself from a community college dropout into one of the most influential figures in Silicon Valley. He was known for his brilliance in software development, his obsessive need for privacy, and the fact that, despite his billions, he lived and died completely alone. No wife, no children, no close friends. Or so everyone believed. But the truth is, Harrison Caldwell had been living with a secret so devastating that it would take investigators nearly 2 years to unravel it completely. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let's start with Harrison. Born in 1946 in Detroit, Harrison's childhood was marked by instability. His father left when he was 7. His mother worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. Harrison was brilliant but socially awkward, preferring computers to people. By 16, he'd taught himself 3 programming languages, using borrowed library books. In 1982, at age 36, Harrison founded Caldwell Tech, a software company that revolutionized data security. The company went public in 1991, making Harrison a billionaire overnight. He was worth $3.2 billion at his death. But Harrison didn't live like the ultra-wealthy. 1 house, a 12-year-old sedan, no vacations, no parties. His employees described him as brilliant, but cold, someone who could solve impossible problems, but couldn't remember your name even after a decade. Harrison had exactly 1 close relationship in his adult life, and it ended in tragedy. In 1987, he met Catherine Wells, a nurse at a charity clinic. Catherine was warm, whereas Harrison was distant. They dated for 6 months, and for the first time, Harrison seemed happy. Then, in March of 1988, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. Harrison proposed immediately. But before they could marry, Catherine was killed in a car accident. A truck ran a red light. She died instantly. She was 27 years old and 3 months pregnant. Harrison never recovered. He threw himself into work with an intensity that worried everyone around him. He stopped socializing entirely. For the next 31 years, Harrison lived isolated, focused entirely on his company, building wealth he never spent, and a legacy he seemed to have no one to leave it to. Now let's talk about Michael Brennan. In 1989, a baby boy was found abandoned at St. Augustine's Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. He was approximately 3 months old, wrapped in a hospital blanket with no identification. Just a small silver chain with the letter M. Police investigated, but no one came forward. After 6 weeks, the baby was placed into foster care and given the name Michael Brennan. Michael spent his first 7 years bouncing between foster homes. He was quiet, observant, and unusually intelligent. One foster mother remembered he taught himself to read by age 4. But Michael struggled with attachment, would wake up screaming from nightmares he couldn't explain. In 1996, when Michael was 7, Richard and Elena Morrison, a wealthy couple from Greenwich, adopted him. For 6 years, Michael thrived in their home. He excelled in private school, showed a gift for mathematics and computer science. But underneath it all, Michael always felt something was missing. He had dreams, fragments of memories he couldn't piece together. When Michael was 14, Richard Morrison died of a heart attack. 8 months later, Elena was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and died within 6 weeks. At 14, Michael had lost the only parents he'd ever known. With no other family, Michael went back into the system. He spent the next 4 years in group homes, graduated high school with honors, and earned a full scholarship to the University of Connecticut. By age 25 in 2014, he had a computer engineering degree, a good job at a tech firm, and an apartment in New Haven. He was surviving. But he never stopped wondering about his origins. He even took a DNA test, hoping to find biological relatives. The test came back with no matches. As far as the database was concerned, Michael Brennan had no family at all. Now, let's return to December 23, 2019. Harrison Caldwell's housekeeper, Martha Chen, arrived at the mansion at 7 in the morning. By 8:30, she noticed Harrison's study door was still closed, which was unusual. Martha knocked. No response. She tried the handle. Locked. Panicking, she called 911. Police forced the door open and found Harrison slumped over his desk. He'd been dead since around 2 in the morning. Medical examiners determined Harrison died of a massive stroke. Natural causes. But then one officer noticed the envelope sitting in the exact center of the desk. It had 2 words written in Harrison's handwriting. For Michael. Inside was a 5-page letter, handwritten, dated December 22, 2019. The letter began with 3 words, "To my son." In the letter, Harrison explained everything: how he met Catherine, how she died, how he learned 3 days after her funeral that the crash had killed Catherine, but not the baby. Doctors had performed an emergency cesarean. The baby, a boy, had survived. Harrison wrote about the impossible decision he faced. He was 31, drowning in grief, socially inept, and emotionally shut down. He had no idea how to be a father. Terrified he would fail this child, Harrison made a choice. He asked the hospital to list the baby as abandoned. He paid a nurse to take the infant to a different hospital, to leave him there. He told himself the child would be adopted by a real family, people who knew how to love. But Harrison kept track. For 30 years, he kept track. He knew which foster homes Michael went to. He knew when the Morrisons adopted him. And when they died, Harrison knew that too. The letter described Harrison's anguish, watching Michael's life unfold from a distance, unable to reach out because what would he even say? Until 3 months before his death, when Harrison was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer. Doctors gave him 6 months at most. Harrison hired a private investigator to locate Michael, to learn everything about his life. And what he learned broke his heart. Michael, at 30, was alone. No family, no serious relationships, working long hours, existing but not really living. Harrison saw himself reflected in his son. The final pages were an apology. Harrison begged Michael's forgiveness, acknowledged he'd stolen Michael's chance at having a father. He explained he'd updated his will, leaving everything to Michael. Every dollar, every asset. But Harrison also wrote that there were documents Michael needed to see in a safe deposit box at Cornerstone Bank in Hartford. The key was taped under his desk drawer. The final line was, "I hope someday you can understand. I hope someday you might even forgive me. You deserved so much better. I'm sorry, son. I love you. I always have. Dad." If this part is making sense, drop a comment with "I'm still here," so we can see who's really watching to this point. And tell us, what would you do if you discovered something like this about your own family? Let us know in the comments. The police faced an unprecedented situation. They had a dead billionaire, a heartbreaking confession, and a son who had no idea his entire life was built on a lie. Lieutenant Sarah Park decided to locate Michael before the media got involved. It took less than 3 hours to find him. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, 2 detectives showed up at Michael's apartment in New Haven. Michael opened the door in sweatpants, holding coffee. When they asked if they could come in, if he could sit down, Michael thought he'd gotten in trouble somehow. The detectives told him that Harrison Caldwell had died 2 days ago. Michael's face showed no recognition. They told him Harrison had left him a letter, that this man claimed to be his father. Michael's immediate response was that this had to be a scam. He started to get angry, but then Lieutenant Park handed him the letter, and as Michael read it, the detectives watched his face cycle through expressions they would never forget. Disbelief, confusion, anger, grief. By the time he finished, Michael was crying. He looked up and said, "Is this real? Is any of this actually real?" They told him it was. They told him about the will, about the estate, about the safe deposit box. Michael sat there staring at the letter. Then he asked, "How am I supposed to feel about this?" Michael had them take him to the bank that same day. He couldn't wait. The bank manager opened the box for them. Inside, Michael found medical records from Catherine's death, hospital documentation of his birth, legal papers showing Harrison had paid the hospital to list the baby as abandoned, photographs of Catherine, dozens of them. And one more thing, a journal. The journal had been kept by Catherine during her pregnancy, intended as a gift for her child. Catherine wrote about her excitement, her fears, her love for Harrison. She wrote about feeling the baby kick, about names they were considering. Michael had been her top choice. She wrote about her hopes for her son. Kind, curious, brave. The last entry was dated March 14th, 1988, the day before Catherine died. She wrote, "I can't believe in just 4 months. We'll meet you. Your father and I are so ready. We already love you more than we knew was possible. I want you to know you were wanted. You were loved. We're going to give you the best life we can. We're going to be a real family." Michael read that entry in the bank's private room, with 2 detectives trying not to watch him fall apart. He told them later it was the journal that broke him, not the money, not even Harrison's letter. It was knowing his mother had loved him, had wanted him, had written these words before she ever held him, and she never got the chance to meet him at all. The news broke on December 26th. Billionaire tech founder dead. Secret son inherits massive fortune. The media descended. Michael went into hiding, stayed at a hotel under an assumed name. The estate was valued at just over $3 billion. Michael, who'd been living paycheck to paycheck, was suddenly one of the wealthiest people in Connecticut. But that's not what he cared about. He couldn't stop thinking about the life he'd never had. In early January, Michael went to the mansion where Harrison had died. Martha Chen let him in and told him things no one else knew. Harrison had a photograph hidden in his desk drawer that he would look at when he thought no one was watching. How once she'd heard him saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. But year on March 14th, the anniversary of Catherine's death, Harrison would disappear and come back looking devastated. In Harrison's desk drawer, Michael found more photographs, pictures of Catherine, and pictures of himself, dozens of them. School photos, graduation photos that Harrison had somehow obtained. Harrison had been collecting them, proof that even though he'd given Michael up, he'd never stopped being a father in the only way he knew how. Michael spent 3 weeks trying to figure out what to do with his inheritance. Finally, he called a press conference on February 12th, 2020. Michael told his story and then shocked everyone. He announced he was donating $2 billion of his inheritance. Half of the organizations support children in foster care, half to grief counseling services and mental health programs. Michael explained that his father had made a terrible mistake out of pain and fear, not malice. And maybe if Harrison had had help, had known how to process his grief, things could have been different. Michael said, "I can't change what happened. I can't get back the years I didn't have with my parents. But I can try to make sure other people don't end up as alone as my father was. That's what I want to do with this money. That's how I want to honor both my parents." The press conference went viral. People called Michael everything from a hero to a fool. But Michael didn't care. He kept $1 billion, sold the mansion, and donated most of the furniture to charity. But he kept a few things: Catherine's journal, the photographs, a watch that belonged to Harrison. But there's one more thing you need to know. Something that changes this entire story. Remember how Harrison wrote about documents that would explain why he'd made the choice he did? Those documents revealed something that changed everything. Catherine had written a living will when she first got pregnant. In that document, she'd specified that if anything happened to her during childbirth, she wanted Harrison to receive a letter. In that letter, Catherine told Harrison she loved him, she believed in him, but she understood his fears. She wrote that if something happened to her, and he truly believed he couldn't be the father their son needed, she wouldn't blame him. She wanted him to do what was best for the baby, even if that meant letting someone else raise him. She permitted him. Harrison had kept that letter for 30 years, and Michael found it in the safe deposit box. When Michael read his mother's letter, giving Harrison permission to make the choice he made, it changed something for him. He realized his parents had both been trying to do what they thought was right. Catherine, knowing she might die, had tried to free Harrison from an obligation he might not be able to fulfill. Harrison, devastated and alone, had taken that permission and made an impossible choice. They'd both loved their son. They'd both tried to protect him in the only ways they knew how. And they'd both been human, flawed, doing their best in a situation that had no good answers. Today, Michael is 35 years old. He lives quietly in Vermont, far from the media attention. He works as a consultant for nonprofit organizations. The foundation he started, the Catherine and Harrison Caldwell Foundation, has helped fund hundreds of foster care initiatives and mental health programs. It's helped thousands of children find permanent homes and provided grief counseling to families who've lost loved ones. Michael rarely gives interviews, but in one, he was asked if he was angry at Harrison for giving him up. Michael said, "I used to be. When I first found out, I was furious. But the more I learned about him, the more I understood he was just a person who'd been hurt so badly, he didn't know how to heal. He made a mistake, a huge one. But he spent the rest of his life trying to make sure I was okay, even if I never knew he was watching. That's not nothing. That's love, even if it's love from a distance." When asked if he thought Harrison was a good person, Michael answered, "I think he was a person who tried to be good, but didn't always know how. I think he carried more pain than any one person should carry. And I think he loved me the best way he could, even if it wasn't the way I needed. Does that make him good? I don't know. But it makes him human. And maybe that's enough." So what do we take away from this? The story of Harrison Caldwell and Michael Brennan is about loss, grief, impossible choices, and the way trauma can echo across generations. But maybe, most of all, it's about the fact that families are complicated. Parents are human. And sometimes people make choices that seem unforgivable, but come from places of pain we can't fully understand, unless we've been there ourselves. Harrison Caldwell died alone in a mansion, having spent 30 years watching his son from a distance because he was too afraid and too damaged to reach out. Michael Brennan grew up without parents, never knowing that somewhere out there, someone was watching, someone cared, someone loved him, but couldn't figure out how to show it. Neither of them got the life they deserved. But in the end, maybe they got something else: understanding, forgiveness, a chance to make meaning from tragedy. Michael now uses his father's money to help other people find the connections Harrison couldn't give him. He's breaking the cycle of isolation and fear that defined his father's life. And Harrison, in his final act, gave Michael not just wealth, but truth. The chance to know where he came from, to understand his story, to have answers to questions that had haunted him. Was it enough? Maybe not. But it's something. And sometimes, something is all we get. So here's what we want to know from you. What would you do if you were Michael? Could you forgive a parent who made that choice? Do you think Harrison was wrong? Or do you think he was doing what he genuinely believed was best? And if you'd inherited $3 billion under these circumstances, would you have kept it or given it away? These aren't easy questions, but they're worth thinking about, because stories like this remind us that families are never simple. Love is never straightforward, and sometimes the most important thing we can do is try to understand each other, even when understanding doesn't erase the hurt. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it. And if you want more real stories about families, secrets, and the complicated ways people try to love each other, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. And remember, everyone's carrying something you can't see. Be kind.